So we said we would start this episode off by talking about USF and our love for the Bulls this season. Are you prepared for 55 odd minutes of just straight USF Bulls talk? Are you good
just
with
that goal-esh goodness? Yeah, of course.
The double G, GGs, as the kids say.
Go Bulls.
Welcome back to the show. I am Ty. He is Dan. Hit follow, hit subscribe wherever it is you get your podcasts. We'd love to have you with us all throughout the month of July as we get into full-on preview mode here in about a week or two. We're excited to get things started on the 2024, excuse me.
Hold on. Let's preview the 2022 season right now.
I got the year wrong. I got the year wrong. That doesn't portend well for how I'm going to do when we talk about the minutia of everything going on in the world of college football. But
yeah, I got Georgia repeating. Yeah.
2024, the season is upon us. It's getting bigger in the window. We will do our previews here within a few short weeks. We'd love to have you with us, so that's why you hit follow or subscribe. Of course, verballers.com, that's our Patreon. You get ad-free episodes, bonus content, access to Discord. And when you and I finally get some bit of alignment on what we're going to do this season, we're going to switch on those in-season bonus perks. We promise it'll be worth your while.
Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but it'd be incredible if you considered subscribing to the Solid Verbal YouTube channel right down below.
On the last episode, we had your burning questions for this coming season. And again, we have not done the full research yet, the full deep dive on any of these teams of which we speak, even conferences for that matter. These are just the things that we jotted down on our notepads that are keeping us up at night. So last episode, you did SEC. You also did the ACC. Today, we're going to do the Big Ten. We're also going to do the Big 12, as well as some G5 thoughts that we've got.
A bunch of G5 conference thoughts.
And I am going to start with the G5.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you as a way to sort of dip in, Ty. My only question, because this is your realm.
Yeah.
Who do you have on the Pac-2's top tier right now?
So hard to do right now.
On a limb.
Yeah.
I'm going Oregon State, Washington State.
I think they're probably the top two in the
bottom
Pac-12.
tier.
Probably one of those two teams as well.
I'm going Wazoo, Oregon State. I just don't. It's tough to see.
Tough to see.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, we joked about the USF thing. USF is a very interesting call as the sleeper G5 team this season because bring enough back, exciting quarterback. Alex Golesh, I think last season, did a good job getting that team to play more his style offense with tempo. And tempo teams sometimes can catch you. I'm very optimistic about USF this season. So I'm curious to watch their plate as they kind of navigate this new world order of college football. The big overarching question for me with respect to just G5 as a whole, not team specific or anything like that, but I ask the many G5 fans who are out there listening to this right now, whether or not the guaranteed playoff spot is enough to make you feel like you're actually part of the sport's future. I go back and forth on this, right? We have talked about the playoff now for a decade. And we had one instance where Cincinnati got in. And Cincinnati had been building under Luke Fickell for a while. It wasn't something that just sort of popped up. But this time around now, with the expanded field, they have thrown the G5 teams a bone. And they have said, one team guaranteed to get in every year. And I don't know like how I feel about this, frankly. I'm curious how the group of 5 fans that listen to this show do, how they feel about this, and if it will change throughout the course of the year. Does it feel like finally we're included, finally we're part of this thing, or does it feel like table scraps? How does it feel, and you know, what are the vibes around that? That's a big question for me going into this. And kind of as a sub-question, can that G5 team then actually compete in the first round against presumably the number 5 team in the country on that team's home field? Will they be competitive? I think that will be very instructive moving forward when we start talking about how do G5 teams feel, how do G5 fans feel about this automatic inclusion in the playoff. If they go in there and get blown out by 42 points, that's not going to be a good look.
My assumption is the people to whom you're referring to as G5 fans probably hate being called G5 fans.
Well, okay. I don't mean that in a negative way.
No. But like, you're a fan of Memphis. You're a fan of UTSA. You're a fan of Toledo, right? That like, you're being lumped into something against your will. And I'm not saying you're doing this because you're a bad person or you have ill will. What I'm saying is it's a really weird position fans of a number of teams are being put in, where they have to be sort of optimistic. They have to sort of make peace with the fact that the sport is going in a pretty horrendous direction for teams like the ones they root for, and then lumping them all together in this horrible place, by their view, probably doesn't feel amazing, right?
Yeah, it's just a very odd time, and it's like, okay, you're getting this automatic inclusion. Finally, at long last, you're going to be included in the playoff thing, but we know the way that the sport is going. Not to be too much of a Debbie Downer here.
No, I know.
We know the way that we can see the writing on the wall, and it's being ruled by Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey.
Yes.
In the Big Ten and the SEC. And I wonder, from the perspective of somebody whose first team is a G5 school, if they feel like this is enough to make them feel part of it.
No way.
Or if it just feels like they're being included for the sake of appearances.
It's like, there's certain like rec basketball leagues that don't allow dunking, or there's certain like 6 foot or under 6 foot rec basketball. You wouldn't like it if everybody was like, you're in the short puny boys league, right? And you're like, well, I'm on the Tigers. Can we call it that maybe?
I get it. I'm curious, and people can write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Let us know. Hit us up on social.
I know what you're saying. For sure.
I'm very curious to know what those vibes are around this particular thing. Because on one hand, it's kind of good. On the other hand, there are greater forces at play that make you think like it's kind of a Trojan horse. So I don't know. That's a big question for me that I'm curious to see unfold.
There's nothing cool about the Big Ten or SEC in my eyes. They're powerful. They're the best, it seems, right now. But like, there is something like the spirit of college football seems to be, or what we understand to be the spirit of college football seems to be more alive in the Mountain West, in the Sun Belt, in the American. And look, the United States military is taking over the American with Army joining. That there is something, there is something that is a wild card about the American now, as they've lost some of their power teams to bigger conferences. But now it's like, all right, there's an interesting like USF, UTSA, Tulane with a new coach, Memphis with a bunch of familiar players. Like they're like the tiers, the power tiers are interesting. The wild cards are interesting. The systems teams are running are interesting. Like if you look at the coaches coaching in the Mountain West, and I know I'm all over the place, and the floor will be yours instantly, I promise you. But like, look at the coaches coaching in the Mountain West in 2024.
There are six new coaches.
It's 6 new coaches, and it's kind of an incredible roster of like Ken Niumatalolo, Jeff Tedford, Sean Lewis, Jay Norvell, like so many interesting, a new guy at, Spencer Danielson at Boise State. It's this weird tapestry of coaches from all over, systems all over, experiences from all over. Like, I kind of love it.
I have 2 other questions specifically about the G5. Maybe you have,
please.
I know you have more as well. I want to know what the deal is with Malachi Nelson.
Oh, okay.
I want to know what the deal is. Because like Boise State, you mentioned Boise State's now like it's going to be the first full season under the new coach.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to retain the services of Ashton Ginty, who had been rumored to be going elsewhere. Obviously, there are people who are interested in his services. You made a video about him. Go and check that out. Ashton Ginty is one of our favorite players, and he's the running back for Boise State. He's really freaking good. But they got Malachi Nelson, who was hotshot quarterback, went with USC, decides he's going to transfer out. Now he's presumably the starter at Boise
I don't even
State.
know if that's true, because Maddox Madsen's still there. And I think that's sort of a neck and neck thing. But
it's a neck and neck thing. But just for our purposes here, for the purposes of this conversation, and I know it's not like a done deal, but let's just assume Malachi Nelson's going to be the starter at Boise.
Yeah.
Okay. If we just make that assumption, I just want to know what his deal is, man.
Underthink it, Ty. What do you think his deal is? Underthink it.
If I were underthinking it, I would say he was not as good as advertised.
Right.
And that is why it is Miller Moss's job in all likelihood at USC and not Malachi Nelson's.
Or Mayava, yeah.
Or Mayava. But we still haven't really seen him. And I'm curious to see what he looks like, what his deal is. Because in this new world of college football, he could be really good at Boise and then decide he's going to go elsewhere. Right.
Of course.
So I'm curious to see what Malachi Nelson's deal is. And then my other big question about the G5 schools is whether or not Liberty is the best G5 team by a long shot. Because in the little bit of reading I have done now in the preseason, just starting to try and wet the whistle and get ready for what's ahead, folks seem to be talking about Liberty as like a near certainty as the singular best team on that G5 level. And I understand the case. A lot of interesting players like Caden Salter. Like there's a lot to like there with that team. I'm not ready to assume anything is fact in early July.
I don't necessarily think they are the best team, but I think they probably have, again, the best path to going 11-1, 12-0, winning like Conference USA. It's not at a place that is teams built to compete with Liberty right now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are better than UTSA, better than Tulane head to head, but their path to that spot seems greased pretty fortuitously.
Very greased. What else do you got in the G5?
Nobody prees like the solid verbal. Okay. G5 wise?
Yeah.
As we lump it in, even after saying that it's not nice to lump it in. Did Tulane upgrade? My answer is probably not, but I love some John Sumrall.
John Sumrall. Everybody's really high on John Sumrall.
And they have Ty Thompson, who I'm familiar with, was supposed to be Oregon's next great quarterback. Didn't work out. Bo Nix became available. They felt better about him. They didn't feel good enough about Ty Thompson at Oregon when Anthony Brown was struggling, when Ty Thompson was a freshman. But in terms of his ceiling and his physical abilities, that could be a talent that's very interesting for Tulane, new head coach. And again, they're one of the teams that should be near the top of the American. And given what John Sumrall quickly did at Troy, given his defensive background and what the best of Tulane's recent defense has had, and it's a lot of new players this year. But I know a lot of people are quite high on Sumrall and think Tulane got a crazy steal. Their transition as Willie Fritz travels to Houston could be quite smooth. And so that is super interesting to me. Elsewhere, is this the USF conversation time or?
I mean, we just talked about USF.
I know, but like
I'm in. Okay, you don't need to convince me further. I'm in. At this point, I'm only going to convince myself that they're better than I thought, and that's a dangerous place to be.
Okay,
but if you have more to say on USF, you can go.
No, it's just like, can their defense get good enough so that they don't give up like a 50 burger to UAB, to Trent Dilfer and UAB? Like that to me is just the sort of smaller question. And it's just like, where will the absurd American upsets come from? Because every year there seems to be 7.5. I don't know if that even makes sense by throwing in a half there, but like ECU goes 3-9, but with a win over whoever, or Navy goes 4-8, but they take down UTSA, which I think they did last year, or Army did last year, excuse me. But like, where do those absurd upsets come from? Because nobody seems fully bulletproof. I know Memphis may be the favorite right now because Seth Hennigan is 39 and ready to roll it back for the Tigers, but it has, I think, a couple of big receivers back. Where do those big upsets in the American come from? Because in the last few years, it's sort of been like these two teams are on path to play in the championship for the last like month and a half of the season, but I think it seems more wide open this year, given who has left and what returns in the American.
No, I think that's totally fair. All that's fair.
The MAC does not seem wide open to me.
Toledo and Miami, Ohio.
Miami, yeah.
One of those two.
Yeah. I guess it's within the MAC. Do I have any MAC questions right now? Does a wild card team exist? Whether it's, Central Michigan, whether it's Ohio now without Curtis Rourke as he goes to Indiana. Like, who is that wild card that is going to win a weird Tuesday night MACtion game 51-49 that completely changes the MAC championship calculus?
Yeah, Western Michigan, I think, is another team that's interesting.
Yeah. Toledo loses their quarterback to Baylor. Yeah. DeQuan Finn. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else in the Mountain West to you?
I'm just curious to see San Diego State.
Yeah.
Sean Lewis.
Can he become the bizarro Rocky Long, where they become completely lopsided in one direction, but probably in a more fun way if they're scoring 45 a game like Kent State did years ago? Yeah.
I kind of just want to see that program amp up.
Yeah.
I feel like there is a lot more meat on the bone at San Diego State that we have seen. And I don't know if a guy like a Sean Lewis with his offensive aptitude can help get them there. But new stadium, obviously a big school, proximity to talent, not bad. Like there are a lot of built-in advantages there. It might not be the first thing that people in the area think of when they're looking for something to do, go to a San Diego State football game. But I still think
people are missing out, Ty.
the people are missing out. I think there's a lot to like there with that program. So I'm more curious to see what he looks like now in charge of that program.
All right, you ready for a bonkers Mountain West game this year? How bonkers will it be? Thanksgiving week, Wyoming, Boise State in Laramie.
Oh man,
I cannot wait. New coach at Wyoming, new coach at Boise State, full-time head coach, Spencer Danielson. That game I'm circling right now just because of look, pretty much everywhere in the Mountain West is up a mountain, but I just circle a few of these games. I mean, I'm always curious about Fresno State and Jeff Tedford, but yeah, it's what will San Jose State look like on offense? Ken Niumatalolo is like, I'm not running the option here.
Yeah.
What will these minds do on the field this year? Brent Brennan off to Arizona. Can't wait.
Where do you want me to go? You want to go Big 10? You want to go Big 12? Because I've got a ton of questions about both those conferences.
Okay. Let's go Big 12.
Big 12. My Big 12 thought, are folks at home with kids in the car, if you want to earmuff it for a second.
Uh-oh.
I want to know, and I said this in the last episode, but maybe dressed it up a little bit more. I want to know what other kind of weird shit Brett Yormark comes up with between now and then. Now in the start of the season. Because it's only July. You got a good month and a half and some change until the season starts. That is more than enough time to come up with another wacky concept or two.
You ready?
I don't know if they're going to rename the conference or not. We know that there are rumors. It seems as if the Big 12 is always on the bleeding edge of any of these new and weird and potentially controversial conversations about how to innovate or move things forward, whatever,
or fund programs.
Like they're definitely trying to push the envelope on a bunch of different fronts, and that's not all bad, but some of it is weird, and there's a lot of time between now and the start of the season. I'm just putting this out there. Like I said in the last episode, just when you let your guard down, something weird pops up in this sport, and it would not at all surprise me if Brett Yormark is the culprit here.
Yeah, there's going to be a press release that says, because the Big 12 is the most forward-thinking, most innovative conference in college football, we will be playing our conference championship game atop the Burj Khalifa.
Right.
We will be playing in Macau.
Something. Yes. So I don't want to count this guy out and assume that there aren't more wacky concepts that will see the light of day before the 24th season.
Sure.
And frankly, now is the time to dump them. If you've got them,
that's true.
Get them all out now, man, because there's so much changing. People are going to forget about it by the time the next news cycle comes around.
Mm-hmm.
Just get it out now. So there's time. And I'm a little bit worried, but I'm also a little bit curious.
All right.
That's the first thing.
Yes.
More specifically, I think from a conference standpoint, it is, can the rest of the Big 12 handle Utah?
Whoa. Who just, by the way, named a coach in waiting, right? Morgan Scalley, the defensive coordinator. Yeah.
Can the rest of the conference handle Utah? And I bring that up because you'll recall, and I'm sure you know this well, when the Big Ten was expanding and adding these 4 teams from the Pac-12, there was this talking point out there, a very popular talking point. Will the Big Ten need to adjust to Oregon, Washington, USC? They just left UCLA out of that conversation, but those 3 teams,
reasonable. Yeah.
They're totally reasonable.
Yeah.
Will the conference need to adjust to those 3 teams? Will those 3 teams need to adjust their style of play to the conference? And I kind of roll my eyes at that because I just don't buy it on the Big Ten side of things. I think the Big Ten is diverse enough. I don't think it's a real talking point, frankly.
Okay.
But I do think it applies to Utah. I really do. I was on the radio in Salt Lake a couple weeks ago, and I said as much. I do think this is true on the Utah side of things with them going into the Big 12 now. Because who else in the Big 12 is constructed in the same way as Utah? Utah wants to line you up. They want to square you up, and then they want to beat your brains in. And when they've got a solid quarterback and a playmaking tight end, they're usually pretty good. Unfortunately, they had neither last year. This year, Brant Kuithe, Cam Rising, I think on track to play. Nothing is for sure until it is. We'll find out where they're at.
Yeah.
But I just feel like the style of play that Utah brings into that conference, it's different than almost everybody else in the conference. Maybe a little bit of Iowa State, maybe a little bit of Kansas State in the way that they go about their business. But Utah feels like they are very unique among that slate of teams. And I just wonder if that creates a little bit of a speed bump for some other program at Oklahoma State that maybe is not used to playing teams that play that style of football. If there will be something of a learning curve as these schools get used to how Utah goes about its business.
I sort of disagree with your evaluation of the Big 12. I think there are enough teams that have built up really good lines. When you look at what Kansas State is on the offensive and defensive line, Iowa State, especially on, in their defensive front with their unique defense. I think there are enough teams, the best of Oklahoma State a few years ago with Jim Knowles. I don't think it's going to be a totally new sport for teams because of Utah.
I don't think it's a new sport, but Jim Knowles has been gone from Stillwater for 3 years now. And I mentioned Iowa State and Kansas State. I agree with you. There are some similarities.
Yeah.
As you look across this conference, though, nobody's built like Utah. Nobody. Not even the new teams coming in with Utah are built like Utah. It just feels to me like they're very different from their peers now in this new conference. And this is not to say there will be a learning curve. It's just one of those questions I have.
Right.
Whether or not there will be some difficulties getting used to that style of play. That's all.
And also, to be fair to everybody, every other out of conference power opponent Utah has played pretty much over the last few years, they've all beaten Utah.
They've all beaten Utah.
Baylor and Florida lost last year, but Utah's out of conference record when they were in the Pac-12, when they played power conference teams, was abysmal.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
And
that supports your case. I'm curious.
I think you make a good point, though. I do, because I think they have been, when you look at recent success, they have probably been among or the most consistent team among their new peers.
I think of Utah against Washington from last season.
Yeah.
And how, despite the fact that we all felt like Washington was better, there was still this nagging feeling like Utah's going to find a way to make this close. Utah's going to find a way to win this game. And I remember there was a lot of action on Utah from a betting standpoint because the betting community felt similarly. And I just wonder if there is some element of that now as they go into the Big 12. Wide open offenses typically, right? This is a different brand of football that Kyle Whittingham has crafted in Salt Lake. And
so they're the team. They're the team backing down in the under 6 foot league.
Yeah,
they're the team with the most post moves. Okay,
they've got the baby hook. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, is Avery Johnson half as good as you think he is?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Is he half as good?
I've pushed all my chips to the center. All my Avery Johnson chips are in the middle of the table.
I look at the schedule. I think they're the better team in every game on their slate. Their toughest games are Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Kansas, and all three are at home. This is not a preview episode. We will get much more in the weeds, I promise you, later this month. But it's there for him. And if he is half as good as you claim, as so many people out there have claimed,
well, the state of Kansas in general, by the way, quarterback play.
Well, the state of Kansas in general, yeah. I mean,
Jalen Daniels,
him and Jalen Daniels, it's exciting times in Kansas.
Yeah, I think you're right to ask it. I just get seduced by ceilings and potential and dual threat and natural athlete. There is something about Avery Johnson, and if Jalen Daniels can stay healthy, if his back is okay, that I just think to myself, man, the most entertaining version of his year is pretty incredible in my eyes.
Is this the moment for Oklahoma State?
Oof.
We did the Oklahoma State specific show.
I think big picture, it's a good question. Yeah.
We did the Oklahoma State specific show a few weeks back. Go listen to that. I thought that was really insightful. My question then is the same as it is now. And it's Mike Gundy's been in Stillwater since 2005. He's won exactly one conference championship. Is that a Gundy thing? Or is that the fact that Oklahoma has always also been in the Big 12?
Yeah.
And now they're out of the way? Who knows? We should get a good answer to this, by the way, this season, which a lot of these are very vaguely worded questions and theoretical and hypothetical and all the qualifiers you want to throw at them. This one, I think we might actually get an answer to, because Oklahoma State's got a lot back this season. There almost are no excuses. They're third in returning production per Bill Connolly's metric. The schedule's extremely favorable. If ever there were a year, this would be it for Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
I want to see what they do with it. I want to see if we see more of the inconsistency that has gotten in their way over the last decade, or if this is the moment, if this truly is the moment now.
Yeah, fair question.
I want to know if the Dion plan is actually working at Colorado. Dion brought in 42 transfers, lost 41 of them, but brought in 42, a full line change in Boulder. Dion is just good at creating hype. And as I've said on this show time and again, I do feel like that is actually part of the plan. Part of the plan here is to fake it till you make it. And I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing. For Colorado, given the depths to which that program fell, you got to start somewhere. And if you can just kick up even artificial hype, that's better than nothing. He has certainly gotten people talking about that program. It's just really hard to envision a scenario in which you don't recruit on the high school level at all. And every year, basically most of your team is new. It takes a really strong leader to get a team to mesh like that, whether it's the coach, the assistant coaches, or the players on the team. You need to have a really strong culture in order to make all of that work.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've got that. I know they're good at posting demeaning things on social media about people that they don't like anymore.
Sure.
I don't know what that speaks to from a culture standpoint. All right. And I'm not going to assume that I know for certain until we see it out there. But what I don't think is fair, and what I don't want to hear from people who hear this, is that, oh, you're just Colorado haters. You don't get what Dion's doing. You don't see the full picture. Maybe I don't, but I know what Dion's doing. And I've seen what he has done in the press. I've seen what he's done on social media. On its face, it does not appear as if that's a great way to build culture. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
No.
Their over-under's 5.5 this year. So Vegas is expecting something of an improvement from a year ago. I hope they get it. Colorado's an interesting story. We would love for Colorado to go out there and blow the doors off some teams, to make this work in a new conference, to give us something more to talk about. We would have a field day with that. Our downloads would be through the roof. I'm skeptical. I don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only question really with Colorado is, what does it look like if it works? And because we already know what it looks like if it doesn't work. What it doesn't look like is Shedeur Sanders standing upright. That's
and
what
look,
it doesn't look like. Yeah.
And again, I have no problem with trying to break the mold and be completely different. And oftentimes that is how you push things forward. It doesn't always work the first time you try it.
Right.
But I do think what he is attempting to do here is something that, if it does work, could totally reshape the way we put rosters together. But it takes a really special leader to be able to cobble together this many transfers in an offseason and build a culture and build something that's sustainable. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So
got a nice do you believe now after the TCU win and went 3-8 right after. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the only question for me with Colorado.
Okay.
How high is too high for UCF? I've got this weird kink with the state of Florida teams right now, South and Central Florida.
Yep.
KJ Jefferson is still playing.
Of course.
He is in a Gus Malzahn system now. They've got a schedule that I think looks very workable. Their toughest conference games are at home. I am probably too high on UCF in the Knights right now.
I don't know, man.
I'm probably too high, but I do like them a lot this year.
Yeah, I think it's okay to be seduced. I think it's okay to put yourself out there. And I think you have with UCF.
I am not seduced this season by TCU at all.
Okay.
Usually I would be by the Horned Frogs. Their win total is 7.5. I don't like this team.
Okay.
I need to dig in more. This is not a preview. We've given this qualifier 1,000 times now, but there's a lot new, especially along the line. There isn't a whole lot on this team that scares me. My question about TCU is, I literally wrote this down. What is TCU? I don't know what they are. I don't know what to expect. Feels like a big unknown to me. Depending what you read last season when they brought Josh Hoover in, either he was a guy that his teammates got behind that they wanted to give the team over to, or he's all those things, but he's not good enough to be the starting quarterback around which you build a roster. I don't know.
Just in the Big 12 in general, as I scroll through, like the depth of interesting quarterbacks is pretty good. Like there's 12 like bare minimum, 10 to 12 bare minimum, like above average quarterbacks or above average ceiling, proven interesting. Like you look across the board. We talked about the Kansas guys, Cam Rising, Donovan Smith at Houston, Rocco Becht. Like there are enough guys there. We'll see with, obviously Noah Fafita, we haven't even gotten into.
No, I'll talk
There's
about
enough
next,
quarterbacks. We'll see at ASU. Sam Levitt, I think, at ASU, the Michigan State transfer, that I think maybe it's not quite the All Costco conference, but I think there is quality in bulk in this conference.
It's the
not
most
just at the top.
It's the most interesting conference in America. It's the most interesting conference in America. It's wide open because
it is.
We have not had this scenario before where the top two teams in a conference leave. And that creates a vacuum. It's not a Nick Saban vacuum. It's different.
Well, Oregon and Washington left, but the entire conference.
Well, the whole conference went under. That doesn't count.
Yeah. That's true.
Big 12 is still there. They added teams. They got more teams now than ever.
Yeah.
And the top two teams went elsewhere. And that's created this huge power vacuum. And so it's really interesting because of that. You look at I challenge you to go out there and look at Big 12 schedules. Doesn't matter which team. Just pick 4 teams and go look at the schedule.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which 4 teams. You're going to look at those schedules. You're going to have no idea what to think. It's wide open. That makes it interesting, I think.
I agree.
And you mentioned Arizona. Will there be a step back for Arizona? What is Jedd Fisch worth to Arizona? Okay, Jedd Fisch went to Washington. He's playing in the Big Ten now.
Mm-hmm.
Still weird to say. That's my other question about all of this. When will it stop feeling weird that these teams have moved conference? Probably never.
Right.
But is there any kind of step back coming for Arizona? Brent Brennan comes in. It was a big deal that he was able to retain both Noah Fafita and Teteroa McMillan, Dan. That's how you say his name.
Good job.
That was a very big deal getting those two guys. But what does this new regime look like? I felt like we were pretty optimistic about Arizona coming into last season. The writing was on the wall that things were trending up and to the right. Felt good about it. But now you change regimes. There's been some turnover. Like what does this version look like now? A lot new up front on the defense, right? Defense was kind of a question a year ago. I don't know. I like Arizona. I really like their talent on offense. I think that's obvious, but how they fit into the pecking order now of this new conference, which feels very wide open. Like they could be the best team in the conference. They could be middle of the pack. I have no idea.
Yeah. My big question with Arizona is more about Brent Brennan. If he has the same sort of mentality, the same sort of aggression, the same sort of killer look that I think Jedd Fisch brought, in as much as anybody can bring it to Arizona, with how aggressive Jedd Fisch was on the portal. And they land T-Mac when I think Mario Cristobal left for Miami because he was committed to Oregon at the time. But he was there, right? Yep. He was drafting off of the opportunity truck. And I know they had a big blue chip defensive lineman committed for a while last year, and that was a local kid. But you could see the aggression in the portal. You could see the aggression in the way that they called offense and improved every year on defense, that they were identifying talent really well. And I just wonder if the obviously unorthodox situation with how late Jedd Fisch left in the process, that they went to their second choice when they hired Jedd Fisch and Brent Brennan. I just wonder if they had the full allotted calendar to find a new head coach if they'd go in a similar direction, because it seems like, Brent Brennan's seems like a pretty good coach and he knows the region, but Jed Fish was at some pretty major programs and like had that experience, and I just think they're sort of cut from different cloths personality wise, and I wonder if Brent Brennan can sort of muster what worked for Jed Fish.
I agree. Is Kalani Sitake really as good as all the blind items indicate? And here's what I mean by that.
He's got a good agent. Yeah.
He really does. Every publication that I have read about BYU and Kalani Sitake for the last couple seasons sings the praises of this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always the same. It's always a lot of, they've got challenges, but Kalani Sitake's a good coach, man. He's gonna figure it out. They went 2-7 in conference last year. They finished 5-7.
Yes.
I'm not surprised by that. You're not surprised by that. I don't think most people listening to this are all that surprised by it. They just joined a power conference. That was almost to be expected. But again, there are no shortages of challenges this season. And by the way, they play all the toughest teams in the conference this year. So kind of a mess last season on offense. The quarterback situation very, very much up in the air. Again, these are all things that I do want to dive into more when we do our actual preview of the Big 12 and BYU as a whole. But I like Kalani Sitake. I don't necessarily disagree that he is a good coach. I think he is. But it's not lost to me that every publication says exactly the same thing about the guy.
Right.
And how he navigates through against what I think is a tough schedule with a very obvious problems with the offense and elsewhere. I don't know. Like I'm losing a little bit of faith there.
He feels like the saying that we like to use, you're not what you are on your best day, you're not what you are on your worst day.
Yeah.
I think BYU should consistently be a bowl program. But in a conference with this high a floor, it seems like the BYU differentiator is unclear. He hit his peak with Zach Wilson in the COVID year. Was that 2020? That was Zach Wilson's big year. And then he went 2021 draft. Like, the results were bowl-ish before then, especially the further he got away from Bronco Mendenhall's time. And there's like this bell curve element to his time at BYU. I don't think they are going to struggle as much as they did last year. I think he will figure certain things out that ailed BYU. But I also think, once again, what's the differentiator? Is he going to recruit an incredibly deep roster of defensive linemen? Is he going to recruit speed at receiver? Like, what is it that BYU is going to do, post Jeff Grimes, who Baylor hired away? Offensively, gigantic question mark.
Huge question mark. Huge question mark. And look, there's a lot to be said for just building a solid team.
Sure.
As we said in the last episode, right? You had that question about the SEC. Who's going to be that team that just coasts along? If BYU just coasts along, that'd be okay. Right, that's a good starting point. But getting there, I'm not sure I see it, especially against the schedule, which looks kind of tough to me.
Yeah.
Final question for me in the Big 12 is about Baylor, and it is how Dave Aranda and this coaching staff looks with the proverbial guillotine hanging over them.
Yeah. My picture, my image with Baylor football right now is, this is your world, Ty. I don't know what course it is in the what's it called? The Open. It's not the British Open. It's just called the Open. When you see those bunkers where there's just a wall between the sand and the hole, you're like, I'm sorry, bunker. I have to hit a 90-degree sand wedge to get on the green.
Yeah.
That's what Baylor has looking at it right now, the mouth of that bunker wall.
He's going to be a little bit more involved in the defense this season, which I think is good. They need that. That is obviously his pedigree. But it is generally not a great formula when you go into a season with that kind of pressure to win or else. And I feel like we've kind of gone through this cycle a few times now with Dave Aranda, who we both like and think is like a thoughtful guy who goes at the game a little bit differently, but it's not like bubbling with enthusiasm. He's a little bit more measured and understated. And I don't know if that's going to wear itself thin this season. Baylor needs some pop. Maybe DeQuan Finn, who I joked with you, I have forgotten is at Baylor at least 17 times this offseason. Maybe a guy like that will give them pop at quarterback. And maybe in tandem with the defense that is hopefully better now with Aranda having more of his fingerprints on it, maybe that will help elevate this team and, at least present something of a roadmap moving forward. But I texted our friend Peter Pope to ask him his thoughts on his thoughts on Baylor this coming season. I said, where is your level of optimism this season? He said somewhere between low and moderate. So take that for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, look, coaches have turned around aircraft carriers before. But typically, when doofuses like you and I are shoveling dirt on somebody for a long time, typically speaking, it's not that we're patting ourselves on the back, but it's tough, especially now, to turn things around, given where the trends seem to be lying and given limited reasons to think that there can be change. That
I agree.
Whether it's a locker room tuning a coach out, whether it's a lack of understanding of recruiting, a lack of development, a lack of insight on coaching hires, whatever, that typically speaking, these things have a shelf life.
Is there anything I missed on the Big 12 front? We still have the Big 10. We're saving the best for last here.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got a ton of questions about the Big 10.
Yeah.
Is there anything on the Big 12 front that is stewing around in the back of your mind that we need to give a voice to?
Yeah. I mean, how many vacation homes is Lance Leipold going to buy with all of the interest around him? We sort of skipped Kansas there. But
I didn't do every team like you did.
I know you didn't do every team.
I'm not a full completist, but that's okay.
But yeah, that's my question with Kansas. It's just like Lance Leipold is somewhere for a long time, for the first time in some time. This is going to be fascinating with him and the continued Kansas experiment as the conference probably becomes more wide open. Not that he wasn't able to beat, Texas and Oklahoma. He was in position to do so a bunch of times. But what does it look like when he and Kansas are an understood strong team?
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
It's very interesting how quickly Kansas went from laughing stock to, as you said, understood strong team.
Yeah.
Which they are. They very much are.
Yeah.
This season. And perhaps that's on me for not having a Kansas specific question.
No, that's fine.
This. We will obviously be talking a lot of Kansas when we get into our Big 12 preview. But the fact that they are not the laughing stock, the fact that now we assume as they're probably one of the top teams in the conference, what a journey. What a ride that's been for Lance Leipold, for sure.
It's not just an incredible ride, but look at the Big 12 as a whole. And I sort of said this with quarterbacks. Does any team truly count? I think because of Colorado's offense, they don't. I think because of Kalani Sitake's at least track record. I think because of Dave Aranda's track record. I think Cincinnati, that the conversation I suppose could be had, but I don't know, maybe it's a portal thing, maybe it's a coaching turnover thing that we're giving coaches the benefit of the doubt, but do any of these programs count as borderline laughing stock? You have to look at Baylor and say, yes, it has been trending disastrously recently, but they won the conference super long time ago. So that to me is fascinating, that I think, and maybe that's one of the underspoken about things in the portal era, that you can do a decent enough job plugging holes on your roster that even if you're 4-8, even if you're 3-9, you're not losing every game 51-3. You're not completely incompetent. The floor can be raised considerably, and I think the Big 12 is, and you've mentioned this, I think it's a good example of that.
Final conference here, Dan. Let's talk some Big 10.
All right. Our conference.
Now Dan.
That I'm officially, as of July 1st, a Big 10 alumnus.
You're a Big 10 alumnus, as am I. You mentioned on the last episode the travel graphics. I want to know if there's going to be any weird travel upsets as part of the
body clock. Yeah.
Yeah, as part of the Big Ten's new setup where you've got teams flying across the country. And a few that I pulled out here, I got 7 examples. There are others that I could have cited. Iowa going to UCLA, Michigan going to Washington, Oregon going to Michigan, USC traveling all the way across the country to Maryland, UCLA at Rutgers, Washington at Rutgers. Rutgers is a very interesting travel upset team.
Close to an airport. It's not crazy, but yeah.
It's not crazy to get to it once you're on the ground, but
Yeah.
if you're UCLA or Washington flying across the country, that's a long journey. Will there be a body clock situation? I'm curious to see, if only because it was so big a part of the logistical conversation we had with Big Ten expansion, if we've got weird travel stories that pop up. Like, obviously, you're going to have the graphic that you mentioned last episode. We will definitely have a graphic like that. But will there be any upsets? Will it go a step further? And will the travel factor into, I don't know, weirdness?
So I'm looking at the schedule matrix right now, and I'm looking at teams that have consecutive, the West Coast teams especially, or if anybody has consecutive West Coast journeys. Washington has Iowa, then a bye week, and then Indiana. So that's kind of odd, I suppose.
I mean, the thing to factor in, I think, for really any of the West Coast schools, for all of the road games, almost without exception, there are no close road games. Unless you're USC and UCLA playing, unless you're Oregon and Washington playing, which is pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty much every other road game is a pretty good jaunt away.
They're going to spend for everybody in the conference?
I'm talking about for those teams in particular.
Oh, yeah, of course.
There are no close road games outside of one or two matchups a year.
Right.
And so I'm curious to see if we get any kind of, weird travel upsets, as I referred to it here. I think it's possible.
Yeah. I think that was the only one I saw in terms of consecutive long travel road trips from the West Coast or to the West Coast. But eventually it will happen. Absolutely.
How will Dan and Ty handle a situation in which QB1 for the defending national champion has a last name of Orgy?
Oh, poorly. Yeah, we're going to handle it poorly.
We're now in our 5th decade of life. I don't think we've ever matured to the point where we can handle this, Dan.
No. Look, the worst possible thing that could happen for us with our very sophomoric humor is that he's okay. Right? If he's terrible, terrible orgy. If he's incredible, wow, awe-inspiring orgy.
Best orgy ever.
Yeah. Look, we're not above this. We're not nearly above this. So yeah, the worst thing that could happen to us is he's fine. He's the 6th best quarterback in the Big Ten.
Us maturing to the point where we can handle this with professionalism is probably not in the cards, but we'll do our best here for our Michigan brethren.
To the orgy family, orgy, yeah. Even saying orgy family sounds weird.
Oh yeah. The real question with Michigan is Sherrone Moore. Like, there's a lot new at Michigan. They're not so much in terms of the players. They did lose players. Of course, they lost players, but it's a coach thing. It's a Sherrone Moore thing. Now, Sherrone Moore...
Can we get it? I'm almost positive it's Sherrone. Is it Sherrone or Sherrone?
I believe it's Sherrone.
Okay. Because your T-Mac thing has me
I don't have a great
spinning.
track record. If you want to fact check me, you can go ahead and do that. But I believe Coach Moore will hit the ground running. I believe he already has the experience he needs to keep this team running at a high level. But it's more a question of, A, you're following up a national championship where a lot walked out the door. And B, now you're in charge of the program that Jim Harbaugh was previously in charge of. And how do you kind of take it in your direction without upsetting the balance of what took Harbaugh like a decade to get in place? I think these are bigger picture questions for Michigan. Surely if they take a step back in year one with a new coach, we see that all the time. That's not even an indication of a program that is in poor health. But what he does beyond this season, I think, is going to be more of the lingering question for that program. They still recruited very well. We don't see any of these signs initially that things are coming off the rails or anything like that. They just won the national championship. But I do think it's fair to wonder about that stuff now as we turn the page on Jim Harbaugh and J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum, right? I mean, there's a lot new here, and it's not a given that this is going to be slam dunk, a great hire, a great move. Michigan's just going to continue on as normal.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see Sherrone, whatever. I'm curious to see what his fingerprints are. Now that it's his, he absolutely has to say, okay, what we did obviously last year was damn near perfect. But now that I have this roster with these new assistants, with like Wink Martindale coming over, like my question is just like, oh, that's an interesting new wrinkle for Michigan. I don't know if it's successful, unsuccessful, whatever. Like, interested when he is the full-time guy. what his like new priorities are in terms of what this team looks like.
Per the 2007 Oklahoma Sooners pronunciation guide, it's Sherrone.
That's what I saw.
Sherrone Moore.
Sherrone. Yeah, I kept hearing Sherron on broadcasts and stuff, and so
Ari Wasserman's the only one who I've heard say Sherron, but it's Sherrone.
Oh, okay. Well, we need some sort of ruling from anybody post 2007 Oklahoma if it has maintained.
Beautiful.
Or
he could
been
change it.
corrected.
He could do a full Monte ball thing.
Yeah, of course.
For all we know. Is Drew Allar actually the most disrespected quarterback in college football, or nah?
Man, yeah, it's a hell of a question.
Did you see this posting from Pro Football Focus a couple weeks ago?
I did not.
Somebody over at PFF wrote a thing about Drew Allar, and I almost made a video about it. I felt very conflicted, so I didn't know how I felt about it. I still don't, which is why I'm asking this question. But the gist of that piece was, hey, everyone's dumping on Drew Allar, but Drew Allar had a really good season last year, was really efficient with the football. He was not as good or as electric, maybe as the hype would have led you to believe, but by and large, he's a pretty good quarterback. And now coming into this new season with the new coordinator, there's a lot to like about him, which I agree with. I don't know if he's being disrespected or if he was just overhyped.
Right.
Or if it was a bad Mike Yurcich system, or if he didn't have receivers to throw to that made the whole thing worse. I don't know if we can actually answer this question or not. If we get through this season and Drew Allar is the truth, as was sort of expected when he came into Penn State as a 5-star, then the answer to that is definitively yes, he was disrespected, and there were reasons for that, but we will know the answer to that if in fact Drew Allar goes out there and blows the doors off of things this year.
Look, every quarterback to me is going to be looked at in the context of expectations, of recruiting rankings, of size of school, expectations of school, perceived improvement over the last guy because of physical abilities. It's no different for how people evaluate Drew Allar. When the best thing you can say about a quarterback is what he didn't do, which is throw interceptions, turn the ball over. Look, the sport is littered with guys who went from being okay to having incredible seasons. Maybe the most notable in the state of PA with Kenny Pickett a few years ago, right? He goes from being, he's a guy, to Heisman caliber.
Yeah, he's a dude.
Did it quickly. And, well, not so quickly. He was there forever, but did it eventually. And so I'm very much of the mind that, like, progress isn't linear. We saw it with Joe Burrow explode from promising but not incredible in his first year at LSU to one of the all-time greats of the sport. Drew Allar is going to have those expectations because of the geography, because of the school, because of his obvious physical talents. But based on what he didn't show that first year, and again, you can blame all you want to blame, and it's all reasonable. The context is all correct. But, like, he might just be a guy. He might be one of those guys that, like, will have another similar season this year, go somewhere else, go play for Ole Miss, and explode. Like, go play for a better offensive system and a better offensive mind, and it's a better fit. And he's away from the expectations and lets loose. Happened with Bo Nix at Oregon, right? He came in with like the 5-star expectations with even more given his legacy status at Auburn and found that better fit and exploded. I think Drew Allar might be that, and I also might think he could grow substantially this year. I think this is sort of misremembering what he looked like last year, which was, to me, not much to be like crazy excited about in the moment.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
One of the bigger picture questions, if we want to zoom out on this a little bit, there's a lot of new at quarterback in the Big Ten.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of new at quarterback. I remember we had this conversation similarly last year about the SEC. We thought that made the SEC interesting, but take a look at your standings page on ESPN and count off the number of new quarterbacks, or at least teams with quarterback questions. And it's like 85% of these teams have real questions at quarterback in some
and
ways.
They're all 25.
Yeah, that's
across the sport, across the conference, excuse me. They've all been at their school or as a college football, their status as a college football quarterback is like weathered, like a great old notebook. This is between Dylan Gabriel and Will Rogers. Alex Orji is not old.
Tyler Van Dyke.
TVD has now felt like he's been around forever and ever.
Yep. I believe
Curtis
Minnesota.
Rourke has been a college football quarterback forever. Yeah.
Minnesota's got a quarterback from New Hampshire who's 24.
Yes. Hudson Card has been a college football quarterback forever.
So it's just there's questions abound. About
Will Howard has been a college football quarterback forever, it seems. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
So it's kind of the COVID year thing, too.
It is.
That we've never had a more familiar group of players in the sport to me.
No. How will the Big Ten West deal with the loss of the Big Ten West?
Yeah, that's tough. Sorry, guys.
No divisions this year. No divisions. To that end, am I sleeping on Minnesota? Hear me out.
Okay. Floor is yours.
19th in returning production, which is third best in the conference. The schedule does have some heavy hitters on it, but the home road splits aren't bad. Max Brosmer, the aforementioned transfer quarterback from New Hampshire, looks like he's the new quarterback. He's got more experience as a starter than they've had in a while, certainly with Ethan Kelly-McManus. But he's a different kind of quarterback. He's a much different kind of quarterback. He's not quite the dual threat that they've had. And I just wonder if that, like, what that new philosophy on offense means, practically speaking.
Okay.
Again, pre-preview, I will talk more about this. I have promised our fine Minnesota listeners that I will put my all into Golden Gophers coverage in the preseason this year.
You kind of have only one direction to go offensively if you're Minnesota from last year. Winning games, scoring 12, 13 points. Losing games, scoring 10, 13 points.
Yeah, it's not good enough. You got to get better.
It's losing to teams like, I think they lost, Illinois and Northwestern last year. They're like, I don't have their schedule in front of me in this moment, but you can only grow from the depths that they fell to last year.
It did beat Iowa, which is good, but
how many points did they score in that win?
12 points. 12
yeah.
points.
Yeah.
Is Miller Moss good enough?
I like this question. I think Miller Moss, if he were the quarterback 2 years ago for USC, there might be something there. But I don't have the exact numbers on the line and the receiving roster. There's promising dudes at receiver, but man, I don't know. I think he's fine. I think Minnesota would love to have Miller Moss. I think most teams in the Big Ten would love to have Miller Moss, honestly.
I think Miller Moss is probably very good.
Okay.
I don't know if he fits the mold of previous Lincoln Riley quarterbacks that we've come to know.
Oh, he doesn't. I can just tell you he doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, who are top 10 caliber NFL draft picks, right? He's not Kyler Murray. He's certainly not Caleb Williams. Is he good enough to run that offense? Yeah. And frankly, maybe they need somebody who isn't a headliner at quarterback to promote more balance elsewhere on that offense and across the team. You know, maybe they relied too much on Caleb Williams. This is very backwards logic, mind you.
Yeah.
But is Miller Moss good enough? What will Miller Moss look like in these high leverage moments? We saw him in a bowl game, 6 touchdowns against Louisville. That was great. Seems to be a USC kid through and through.
Yeah.
Is he good enough? I don't know.
I would zoom out even more about USC right now in terms of what is USC?
Like my TCU question from a few minutes back. What is USC? I didn't quite know how to articulate this. And I thought maybe it was just me being reactive and not being with the times. Are there weird vibes around this program right now?
Yeah.
I feel like there are very weird USC vibes at the moment, where Lincoln Riley's always in the news for kind of like the wrong reasons. The latest was he's trying to run away from some of these pre-scheduled matchups. We had the weird media circumstance with him last year, kicking somebody out or suspending somebody. I forget what exactly happened there.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like this added pressure that we've seen at USC has not mixed too well with Lincoln Riley. And now with losing a generational quarterback in Caleb Williams, and after 2 years of basically not playing defense, I don't know what this team is.
Yeah, I mean, it seems good players don't want to play for USC. And if that's the situation, I don't know how you turn it around. If it's an NIL thing, if it's a Lincoln Riley thing, if it's an assistant coach thing, which they just overhauled, Like, if good players, other than Bear Alexander, like they've had decent players in this program, even on defense under Lincoln Riley, but on the high school ranks, they're getting pantsed on the recruiting trail. Like the guys they're bringing in the portal, some of them are fine, but the results aren't there. If you're going 7-5, 7-6, whatever, with Caleb Williams, what is USC under Lincoln Riley? Is there any reason to believe it's going to be any different than sort of what we've already seen? And they had like 3 or 4 players commit from state of Georgia. They definitely have a quarterback of the future committed as of this recording, but those players have already decommitted, those blue chip defensive linemen. So I think we just are seeing what USC is.
Couple more very quickly.
Yeah.
Is there a weird EFIS situation for Northwestern in that home field advantage?
Yes, of course there is.
And their portable stadium.
Yes.
How high is too high for Rutgers? They've got a lot back. Speaking of teams that are kind of built differently, Rutgers is kind of built differently. Maybe Ethan Kaliak-Manis, he's going to be their quarterback now. He transferred out of Minnesota. He's going to be the guy at Rutgers. Now that Gavin Wimsatt has also transferred, he went to Kentucky, presumably to be a backup. I don't know. Like, I kind of like this Rutgers team. I like the fact that they want to run the ball down your throat. I think they're built in a very specific way. I think they'll catch somebody this year. I just don't know who that'll be. Some interesting travel matchups.
Can't wait to watch Northwestern for both obvious and unobvious reasons. I think their offense should be decent. Their defense, we'll see. And their home field advantage, as you referred to.
Beautiful.
It's 10 feet from Lake Michigan. Like, it was windy and really difficult to play at Ryan Field at times every year. You remember the C.J. Stroud year.
Yep.
This is on the lake. I don't know what kind of barrier they're going to try. It's not going to help. It's on the lake.
Unless they're building 100-foot wall, there's no way they can block the wind.
And even if, look, you haven't mentioned Iowa yet in terms of questions.
That's going to be my last one.
Yeah. Even if Iowa's offense is capable enough to the point where we're not having that conversation of like what number is too far for an under in an Iowa game. We might have that conversation with Northwestern games because of the weather factor. What number under is just too comically low to pass up? And then you like see the late October forecast in Evanston and you're like, man, I don't even understand this icon in my weather app.
Yeah.
Like it's wintry sludge. It's fast moving wintry sludge is in the forecast. Like that's what we're gonna have at times with this stadium's location.
Final question for me is an Iowa question, and it is whether or not 2024 is going to force Kirk Ferentz into retirement. I feel like we're at that point. I know he's royalty in the state. I know every time we bring this up, it is met with mixed reviews. We've got Iowa people who say, what more do you want from the guy? He's won for however many years now. He's been very successful. The program's been built in his image. We all love him. We love what he stands for. There are plenty of other folks who are on the exact opposite side of the spectrum who were ready for Kirk Ferentz to leave 10 years ago.
Yeah.
How you receive this question probably speaks volumes about which side of the fence you're on here. But
right.
Had to fire his kid. Not easy. Brings in a new coordinator who I think we're generally optimistic about, Tim Lester. But the success of the offense this season and bigger picture, Iowa's ability to now compete and contend in a divisionless Big Ten, that's going to give us clarity on where Kirk Ferentz is. Like, if they try to switch the offense up and Cade McNamara is healthy and they still play defense at a high level, which we have come to assume is fact at this point.
Yeah.
If they can't get that offense rebooted in a way that it seems as if things are trending in a better direction, I just wonder if that pressure will be too great for him to survive another offseason.
You're not wrong. I think he's sick of it. I think he's sick of the questions. He's sick of the ongoing narrative. He's sick of the jokes. And no matter what he says in a press conference about we won this many games, it's pretty good, right? A lot of teams would love to win this many games. Like, I don't think his existence is super fun as it stands now. And so maybe it will be with Tim Lester and this new offense, and maybe some more offensive health and offensive creativity and more red zone activity. That's positive.
The thing is, it's probably a bad assumption that getting rid of Kirk Ferentz and replacing him with somebody else will yield the same amount of success. Because this program's been successful over the years. They've been very, very steady. And they've had a glaring hole at offense. But by and large, this program's been good. They've found a way to do less.
Right.
So we can't assume that just because there's somebody new, they would get back to the same levels as Kirk Ferentz. There's a reason he's been there forever.
Yeah.
But that being said, I don't see how this current state of the offense hasn't worn people thin. You know, there is an element of this that reminds me a little bit of the Joe Paterno stuff, separate from the scandal. I'm not talking about that, but
yeah,
towards the end, Joe Pa was running 43 power up the middle and driving people insane. Mm-hmm. Everybody was ready for a change. I can't imagine that there isn't a large contingent of folks in the Iowa community and the fan base that just feels like they need to get this over with already. Enough is enough. We've seen this. We know what play is coming. If they can't introduce any kind of wrinkle or give the offense any kind of spark this season, I would expect that those cries will grow a lot louder for Kirk Ferentz and for the new athletic director, who just took over full-time earlier this year, to make a change, to try and inject some sort of enthusiasm into this program, because it is a very solid program. They have the infrastructure in place, and there's no reason Iowa couldn't contend on a year in and year out basis. They're doing it now without an offense. So they could find some way to kind of, tap more into the present of things. I think they'll be all right. It's just getting over this Ferentz hump.
Here's the subtext of this is that when you ask a question like this, the sub-question or whatever is Kirk Ferentz bigger than Iowa football? He's not the only coach to have won in Iowa City.
No.
Just like Barry Alvarez is not the only coach to have won in Madison. Like, all these guys, all these legends are not the only guys who won first or subsequently. And so saying like, Kirk Ferentz has won a bunch of games here and he's won in a bunch of unorthodox, challenging ways also suggests that he's the only one who can win there. And I don't believe that to be the case. As you stated at the end of your thing, like, the infrastructure is there. This program has a very good reputation among players who play a number of different positions, especially along the lines, especially tight ends. Like, it's a program where players go to succeed, and he's been there forever. He has been the constant there, but I don't think any coach is bigger than a program.
Well, they shouldn't be.
Or shouldn't be, right?
They shouldn't be. If you're doing it right, they shouldn't be. That, unfortunately, is not the culture of sports more often than not.
Right,
but
of course.
It should not be the coach as the king.
Right. And I think there's just a shelf life. I think there is just an amount of time. Now, if Tim Lester is the guy and it's a great hire and it's a shrewd hire and Kirk Ferentz shows an ability to adjust and is not constantly bemoaning all of the things that have annoyed him about offensive line rules since 2015 or whatever.
Keep him forever. Keep him forever.
Fine.
If it works, keep him forever. That would be the best case scenario. That'd be the absolute best case scenario. But yeah. I'm skeptical. And rightfully so. I think everybody should be skeptical.
Yeah. Okay.
That is all I have in the Big Ten. That is all I have in the Big 12.
Nothing Oregon? Man.
Well, Oregon.
What's nothing Ohio State? No Ohio State questions?
I do have one more question.
What about Chip Kelly? What does Chip Kelly
do? I do
there?
have one more question.
Yeah?
It is about Oregon.
How annoying will Dan be if Oregon's excellent this year? The answer is very. Even more than usual.
This is a good way to close out this episode.
Okay.
All right. And it is a specific question for both Oregon and Ohio State. And the question is, does more equal more? Because we have seen both of these programs go crazy on the recruiting trails, on the transfer portal side of things, to beef up their rosters. Ryan Day feels like he is amped up to 1,000 trying to build up this roster as best he can. They retained a lot of talent from a year ago, did not lose many of their key contributors from a year ago, brought in Caleb Downs, only lost Marvin Harrison Jr., and obviously Kyle McCord went elsewhere. But, by and large, this program has added so much talent that
kids,
we're kind of writing them in almost with Penn to the playoff already. Barring a catastrophe, they have to be in that field. And Oregon is in a similar spot, if not a better spot. I mean, with what they've done just on the defensive line. It's incredible. And so I just wonder if all of these off-season and sometimes in-season initiatives to add talent is going to actually get them over the proverbial hump. If that is actually going to make these teams better. Or if we're going to find ourselves in a similar conversation the end of the season with Michigan playing Ohio State, same old song and dance. If we're going to find Dan Lanning in a key situation and he makes a bonehead decision, puts his team behind the 8 ball, and then they don't end up playing for a conference or playing in a big game or something like that. Like both of these teams figure to be in the playoff, but I just wonder if all of this energy towards making the roster better is actually going to make the team better.
Well, it's that coupled with easier humps that Jim Harbaugh and Kalen DeBoer leave Ohio State and Oregon's respective schedules. So
it is
that
not in a
plays
vacuum.
a factor.
It's definitely not in a vacuum.
Yeah, no, I think all that is right. I mean,
it's not an unfair question, though. It's not an unfair question. We have seen this before.
Right.
We've seen this before where teams go out there and they assemble incredible talent. Texas A&M just did it with Jimbo.
Unproven talent on that level, though. It's different when it's bringing in portal guys. Yeah,
it's not the same thing, but it's not entirely different. And I'm just curious to say, I hope for each of their sakes, it does make the team actually better. It does show some kind of improvement that fans can hang their hat on. But, we can't assume as much. We just can't.
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking, honestly. What you're asking if bringing in or retaining good players is a good thing?
No, what I'm saying is we hear the names that both of these programs are bringing in. And I think it's very easy to assume that, the team will be better.
Yeah.
The team's going to be better because the talent on hand is better. They're deeper. They're stronger. They're built for the playoff. That doesn't always happen, though.
Right.
It doesn't always happen.
And the coaches that you're talking about, Ryan Day and Dan Lanning, have certain, great record except for reputations.
Dylan Gabriel, you can go back to the beginning part of this year. I said Dylan Gabriel is going to be the best quarterback in college football this year. It's the best situation, maybe, of anyone in college football.
Yeah.
Right. So I understand why they would go and get Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel gets hurt. What happens next? Dylan Gabriel, doesn't mesh with the offense. I don't know. You know, all these things can happen. There are a million possibilities. If it doesn't work with Dylan Gabriel, then suddenly maybe Oregon isn't as exciting as we thought. So we can't assume that more talent equals a better team.
I guess, but poor Oregon, if Dylan Gabriel gets hurt, they have Dante Moore, a 5-star from a year and a half ago, coming back to Eugene. Yeah.
It's a lot of talent. It's a bit of a stretch.
Yes. All right.
Does more equal more? That's all I got.
Yeah, Dante Moore. That's what it equals. Those are worthwhile questions about the Big 10, Big 12. We had a bunch of G5 stuff. This hopefully sets the table for our deeper team and conference previews in the weeks to come. Again, I will echo what we said at the beginning of this two-parter. Nobody prays like the solid verbal.
Dan Rubenstein, happy July 4th.
Hey, to you as well. What are your plans?
I think we're going to hang out with some friends here in the neighborhood.
Yeah?
Nothing crazy.
Grilling?
Yeah, probably some grilling.
Fireworks?
Not a big fireworks guy. I'm gonna hold up in the basement.
Because of the dog. Yeah.
Yeah, the dog is gonna lose her mind. How about you?
Okay. Are you grilling? Is somebody else grilling?
Haven't decided yet. We were invited a few places, so
brag much?
If somebody else wants to do the grilling, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, same. We're going over to some friend's house. I think I'm bringing over some food, but I'm not the main feeder. I'm looking forward to it. Should be great.
All right. Well, to one and all, have a happy, safe, healthy 4th of July. We will be back next week as we inch ever so close to our team and conference previews.
Yes.
Make sure you hit follow or subscribe if you have yet to do so. Verballers.com is where you can go for ad-free episodes, bonus content, et cetera, Dan.
All right. That's all I have.
For that guy over there, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand. Thanks for downloading, listening, supporting. We'll talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace. Is this when we do our day one Wimbledon recap?
I think so, yeah.
Ding.